Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have with us today Kevin Ring. He's the author of a book out that, well, it is pretty impressive. It's called Scalia's Court, a legacy of landmark opinions and dissents. And as we all know, that we lost Justice Scalia this past year, and we want to talk about that. So, Kevin, good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Well, pretty interesting book. What do you think has been the overall impact of Scalia's death on the court?
Well, we're feeling it right away. We had the decision last week, the 4-4 decision on the collection of union fees from teachers who did not want to participate and give their money for causes they didn't believe in. So we're starting to see, because the court's moving forward, what it's going to be like without him there. Of course, there's the numeric absence, that these decisions are now 4-4 instead of winning them 5-4. But the court's also lost an intellectual leader. Justice Scalia was the backbone of the conservative members of the court for the last 29 and a half years. And so I think we're feeling his loss now as they resume their business.
Now, the court is at 4-4. What happens if there's a decision that comes up 4-4?
The lower court ruling stands. So, whatever they had decided. And so this was an appeal in that case. And so to overturn the confiscation of dues, they needed to reverse the decision. But when it's 4-4, the lower court stands. So, it's a big difference.
What did you think of him? What did you think of his style and his rulings?
Well, one progressive law professor who didn't agree with many of his opinions said he was the greatest stylist since Oliver Wendell Holmes to serve on the court. And I think that's true. Part of this book is a showcase of his philosophy and his judicial sort of views and how he thought we should interpret the Constitution and federal laws. But the other part was really just to showcase a brilliant thinker and writer. He was an amazing communicator. And whether you agreed or disagreed with his views, his opinions are like no other. Nobody writes the way he did. There's no one left on the court who's going to argue the way he did. You wouldn't put together a book of opinions like this about any other justice, because they'd be pretty boring, mundane legal opinions. But he wrote with such style and wit that they were a joy to read. And I wanted to bring that to a larger audience than that would normally read Supreme Court opinions.
How many did you reference in there? Because, I mean, how do you capsulate an entire career on the court? How many did you reference in your book?
There's probably about 40 or 50 opinions that I referenced. Now, the largest excerpts, so there's, 11 or 12 chapters that focus on different areas. So there's a chapter on abortion, one on death penalty, Obamacare, illegal immigration. And so each of those chapters may highlight only one opinion, because I'll include the full opinion so people get a feel for how he wrote and argued. But when I introduce the chapters, I try to highlight some of his other opinions that might have been in that area that I don't have the space to capture fully, but I think are relevant to understanding how he came to the view he did in the opinion that I actually used. So I had to read several hundred opinions from his 29 and a half years on the Supreme Court and narrow it down. But I could have written a book twice as long, and this one's long enough.
Sure. Let me say, our viewers and listeners, it's called Scalia's Court, a legacy of landmark opinions and dissents. Is available at Amazon, I would assume?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you this. He had a unique ability, not only in his writings, but in his ability to communicate verbally, to take a very complex issue and bring it down to simple terms. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think that was part of his brilliance. And I think that's what makes this book possible, is that, some of these issues are very complex, and the media reporting on it and some of the political debate about these opinions is very partisan and petty, but some of these topics are very complex. But what he was able to do was to communicate these complex ideas in very concise and colorful language. I think that was his gift. I think that is what made him unique, in addition to having the philosophy he had and being as principled as he was. But really, that ultimately is what made a book like this possible, is to help people understand what issues they were dealing with, what really important struggles about the future of our country and who should govern us and who should make these decisions. But he was able to make those issues come to life with his words. And there are plenty of examples in the book of just his witticisms and things that appeared in opinion after opinion.
You know, from what I've read, he stuck to the principle of interpreting the law. He didn't get swayed with cultural influence or even political influence. And he was criticized for that, but that ended up being his stronghold, right?
Absolutely. And what's amazing is, over time we've seen the Supreme Court become this Mr. Fix-It mechanism, where if people don't like the way the democracy that we've governed ourselves, we want the court to fix it and to step in and do that. And he was willing to let the people decide a lot more issues than sometimes the elites were. So things that he thought weren't in the Constitution, such as abortion or gay marriage or physician-assisted suicide, important matters, important cultural issues, no doubt. But they're not referenced in the Constitution. There's something that he would say as a judge he had no special insight into. He wasn't given any guidance by this Constitution as to how to answer that question. And in those cases, he thought then those should be left to the people to decide. And so there was a humility that came with that sort of outlook that, these are 9 unelected attorneys who don't represent America in any real sense. They weren't elected. They have life tenure. The whole point of giving them that life tenure is to inoculate them from political pressure and keeping up with the times. And so he viewed his role as more modest, and he would have left more decisions to the people. And I think that was a commendable way of approaching this.
On the other hand, the court appointments is very political at times, and yet he ended up being kind of like the anchor on the court. Now that he's gone, how vulnerable, in your opinion, is the Supreme Court?
I'm afraid it's very vulnerable. And, he was confirmed 98-0. That wouldn't happen today. The process has become so much more politicized. And so, having the views he had and being able to articulate them and having a clear philosophy almost strikes against people now. Now you try to get somebody on the court who is bland, vanilla, doesn't have that many writings that could be scrutinized. And so, I think it would be hard for someone like Justice Scalia to get on the court today. And I think that's a shame. And now that he is gone, though, he was not only a leader, but just based on the numbers, he was a swing vote. And so some of the decisions he cared most about, in which the court held his position 5-4, are now in jeopardy of going the other way. And so it's a really precarious time.
It doesn't appear at this point that there'll be a replacement nominee go forward at least until after the election. I guess that would be a good thing?
Well, I think it would be a good thing if it was the wrong person. And my disagreement with the Senate Republicans is that I think they should be using this opportunity, the vacancy, is an opportunity to talk about what kind of Supreme Court we want, what we see that's function, and what kind of justice we think should serve on the Supreme Court. Instead, we're talking about process. We're talking about, should they meet with him? Do they have to have a vote on him? These sorts of really questions that people don't care about. And instead, I think this would be a good time to renew our understanding of what the Supreme Court's supposed to do in our society, what role it's supposed to play in our governance, how it stands in our separation of powers. And so I would like to see some process held, if nothing else, to use this opportunity to educate the public. As a constitutional matter, I don't think the Republicans have to do anything with President Obama's nominee, Judge Garland. The Constitution just says they have to give their advice and consent, and their advice may be, don't send us anyone. So I don't think they're required to do anything, but I think as a prudential matter, it would be smart to use this opportunity.
All right, one other quick question, Kevin. There appears to be some controversy. I guess George Mason University really wanted to recognize Scalia and his legacy, but has run into some roadblocks there. What's your thought on that?
Well, the controversy was just a silly one, which was the way they were going to word the title of the new law school had an unfortunate acronym. And so that's what happens when you have Antonin Scalia school. And so they're just going to rename it. They're just going to change the words around, but I suspect that'll be approved, but it's allowed some on the left to have some fun with it.
Who would you like to see replace him? You ever thought of that?
You know, I mean, there's a dream pick that I think would be the most like him. I think the best pick for the country would be a guy by the name of Paul Clement, who was a Solicitor General under President George W. Bush, who clerked for Justice Scalia, is now one of the leading appellate advocacy attorneys in the country. He's argued the most cases before the Supreme Court. I think he would come the closest to matching Justice Scalia's not only brilliance, but also his style. And I would hope that he's on the short list for any future Republican president.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Kevin. Again, the book is entitled Scalia's Court, A Legacy of Landmark Opinions and Dissents. There's a picture of it there on the screen. Check it out at Amazon. Thanks for your fine work. Let's stay connected, okay?
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. We'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.